Well, it was only a matter of time. Kelowna City Council has voted to kill short-term rentals here in Kelowna. Now, if you have a short-term rental here in Kelowna or another area in BC and are wondering what to do with it now that this market is almost dead, then stay tuned to the end of the video where I'll give you 3 solid ideas to help that investment continue to make you money. Now, I've spent quite a bit of time researching this topic. As you can probably see on my channel, I've got a couple of more videos that have to do with Airbnb style short-term rentals. Now, as you may or may not know, this topic continues to evolve over time. I mean, this shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone with how the province has seemingly interfered and how municipalities can issue zoning for different styles of properties. It was a foregone conclusion. Now, there are 220 people in the last 90 days who are just like you that have subscribed to this channel. So if you're watching for the first time, then go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe button as well as the notification bell. Just like the other 663 people, you'll be notified as soon as we upload new content to the channel. Okay, as you may or may not already know, the province has restricted short-term rentals with the largest piece of this legislation to go into effect this May 1st, 2024. Now, this is when those suites that are not in a person's principal residence and are being rented out on a short-term basis will become subject to huge fines. So if you have a townhouse or a condo or a home that you don't live in or use as your principal residence, you will not be allowed to rent out your property on a short-term basis through companies like VRBO and Airbnb. Now, this is specifically for communities that have a population that is larger than 10,000 people. So if you're in Peachland or another area similar to this size, and you're watching this, don't worry, at this point, you won't be affected. Now, the other exception to this rule will be on First Nations land, unless, of course, that First Nation decides to follow suit with the municipality and the province. Now, there's been some really decent media coverage on the changes that the City of Kelowna has made through a few local publications, and I'll be referencing a couple of these as we go through some of this stuff in a little bit more detail. Now, I think the first time I heard the news on this was through Castanet. They actually get into a little bit more detail, specifically who voted in favor and who abstained. Before I get into that, though, let's get into the motion, what was actually passed about 2 weeks ago in Council. Now, according to the City of Kelowna website, the City of Kelowna Council is advancing changes to the city's short-term rental regulations. The amendments, effective May 1st, 2024, will generally prohibit short-term rentals in mixed-use and residential zones of Kelowna with some exceptions. Existing licensed secondary short-term rentals numbering 498 can continue under a legally non-conforming status if they meet provincial primary residence criteria. So this means that the city has gone further than the province. If you have a suite in your principal residence that you have been advertising and renting as an STR and you don't have a license to do so, you'll have to stop. Now, there are 498 properties that have licenses that will be grandfathered in and allowed to continue to operate as an STR so long as the owner of the property still lives in the property. Now, one question that came up in conversation just the other day was whether the designation of the STR through the licensing would transfer over with a property sale. Although I haven't seen anything published to say anything different, my first thought would be that the license would probably end when the property is sold. Now, the city has made a request of the provincial government to allow 3 properties in Kelowna to continue to operate outside of the provincial and municipal legislation. Those are Del Sol, Aqua, and Sunset Drive. Now, the guidelines the province has in place to allow for such exemptions is that the area has to have a vacancy rate at or above 3%. Now, Kelowna has not had a vacancy rate that high since 2012. So who knows if they will be granted that exemption. If the province holds true to the term in the legislation, though, this is not likely to happen. Now, Castanet was the first publication that came across my email 2 weeks ago that mentioned the city councillors that abstained, voted for, and also who voted against. Now, the 2 councillors that abstained due to a conflict of interest, meaning they own units that they rent out as short-term rentals, were Maxine DeHart and Loyal Wooldridge. The councillors that voted for the motion were our mayor, Tom Dias, Luke Stack, Mohini Singh, and Rick Weber. The 3 councillors that voted against the motion were Ron Cannon, Gord Lovegrove, and Charlie Hodge. Now, I've reached out to all of the members of council to ask them what studies were presented by staff that helped them with their decision. Now, I'm genuinely curious what research is helping to guide these decisions. Specifically, I'm interested to know if banning short-term rentals in other jurisdictions have helped to alleviate housing strains and increase the amount of long-term rentals in those areas. Does this truly work, or is it all just based on theory? Now, as of today, I'm still waiting on those studies. I did get answers back from 4 of the counselors. However, they all directed me to the city for answers around the studies or just flat out refused to comment. Now, I've asked ChatGPT to help me summarize some of the other news articles that I've read instead of just cherry picking the parts of the article that will fulfill my narrative, which if you've watched my other videos on this channel, you should know by now. In this video, I'd just like to give an accurate summation of what's actually happened based on the facts. So here we go. This is me reading a summary by ChatGPT. This decision, which followed extensive public consultations and debates, aims to redirect properties towards long-term residential use. The council has also indicated an ongoing review of specific properties for potential exemption from these restrictions. This development comes as a response to growing concerns over housing accessibility in Kelowna, a challenge faced by many urban centers. By enforcing stricter STR regulations, the City Council endeavors to balance the rights of property owners with the broader community's need for stable and affordable housing. The community's reaction to these changes has been varied, with some applauding the move as a necessary step towards addressing the housing crisis, while others express concern over the impact on local tourism and the economy. As Kelowna navigates these changes, the effectiveness of these new regulations in improving housing conditions remains a focal point of interest for both residents and policymakers. Okay, what do you think? Not a bad summation, right? Okay, now if you remember at the beginning of the video, I talked about a couple of different strategies that you might deploy if you own a property used specifically for short-term rentals and you aren't sure if you want to dump the property just yet or not. All right, well, the most obvious one would be to shift your STR to a long-term 12-month rental. I mean, you could keep the furnishings in the property that you were using for the Airbnb, and you may be able to get away with charging a little bit of a premium for that fully furnished option. Now, obviously, you'll need to do a little bit of research around this and first determine whether keeping that property will make sense from a cash flow perspective. One of the tools that I typically point people towards is rentfaster.ca. So if you go there and sign up for an account, you'll actually get access to some really great tools that they have on their back end. Okay, number 2 would be to go with a 91-day rental option over the course of the summer and then possibly move to a 9-month rental after that. Now, technically, according to the province and the city, a short-term rental is not in your primary residence and is 90 days or less. This gets you, I would think, inside of those guidelines. Now, of course, there is a caveat to this, and this is to check with your lawyer, the city and or the province to make sure that this would be okay to do. Basically, don't take my word for it. It's just an idea. You've got to do your own due diligence. Okay, and lastly, the very last option would be to rent the property out over the course of the next 12 months and then hope like hell that a new government is elected in BC and these rules are reversed. Okay, that's really not a great option. So obviously the last option would be to list the property and sell it and cash out. Now, you're going to need to speak with an accountant to understand the capital gains, potential capital gains on the property if there are any, and also understand that you are no longer selling a property with a premium attached to it. Now, that premium you may have paid for when you bought was the ability to run a short-term rental out of that property. Now, I saw a report here recently that a specific building in Victoria could lose 15 to 20% in value because of these new rule changes. So be prepared. All right, that's all I've got for you today. If you're looking to make a move into or out of Kelowna and surrounding area, then we should probably chat. You can reach out to me on my cell at 403-827-7527, or you can send me an email to info@livelovekelowna.ca, or alternatively, you can go ahead and click the link down in the description to book a time for a Zoom or an in-person coffee or beer. Okay, we'll see you on the next video.